K-pop fans are obsessed with convincing others that their faves are the original creators of trends and fads, and sometimes it seems like you guys care more about that than the actual music. Fandoms are deeply invested in proving that their favorite group or an idol is the originator of trends, and this investment runs deeper than just pride or rivalry. It's not simply about who wore an outfit first or who had a concept earlier. For many fans, being the first is a form of validation. It means their artist isn't just popular, they're influential. This obsession with originality can apply to anything: a musical style, a visual concept, a choreography trend, even something as specific as a certain makeup look, hairstyle, or pose in a teaser image can all be used as basis for imitation. Fans will pull receipts from years ago, matching timestamps, and side-by-side screenshots to prove that their group paved the way and the others are simply copying. In a genre that's been consistently criticized for being overly manufactured or artificial, originality becomes really important. This is why you see more often or not fans not competing on who did something better, but who did it first. Of course, better is subjective and harder to prove, especially against fans who are going to be biased regardless. They're not going to be honest. However, competing on who perfected a concept or trend is much more indicative of a musical talent than whoever started it, no? Especially if they are not even the originator of the idea. They just are the first one to introduce it to K-pop.
So why does authenticity matter? Besides the obvious reasons, right? Authenticity has an emotional aspect to it. When you know that a creation is made deliberately for the audience by the artist, it feels more like a communication and a two-way street rather than simply consuming a product, which, admittedly, sometimes K-pop feels more like that. It's not just about proving a point, it's about forming a connection. When fans believe their favorite idol is original, creative, or deeply involved in their own artistry, that belief makes the bond feel more personal and meaningful. It's comforting to think that behind the polished performances and pre-planned comebacks, there's a real person with vision and passion in a genre as systematized as K-pop, where so much is manufactured by design. Authenticity becomes a rare and prized trait. That's why when fans argue over originality, they're not just fighting over facts. They're protecting the emotional story they've built around their idol.
As someone studying the intersection of politics and economics, I'm particularly aware of the works of soft power, how culture becomes a tool of influence, especially in the global entertainment landscape. Even though this may not be my primary area of specialization, it's impossible to ignore that the political dimensions of something like K-pop, which exists at the intersection of global capitalism, national identity, and cultural diplomacy. When I hear criticisms of K-pop being too Americanized or unoriginal, I think it's important to situate that within a broader historical and geopolitical context. The conversation often lacks nuance, and the nuance that I want to bring into this conversation is not to negate or excuse problematic actions, but to add depth and understanding. The cultural influence of the United States in East Asia, particularly South Korea, didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was the result of deliberate strategic efforts by the US following World War II, most notably through the establishment of military bases and the spread of American media and consumer culture. South Korea, as a frontline state in the Cold War, became a crucial site of American influence, militarily, economically, and culturally. Some fans really like to act like these two countries are very separate instead of deeply interconnected, with their histories, like very recent history too, being very complex and dynamic. Of course, the interconnectedness is very unbalanced, but it's still very much there. The influence never fully receded, and its legacy is still very much embedded in South Korea's media and entertainment industries. It's not just that K-pop has passively absorbed American influences. However, South Korean entertainment companies have had to navigate an international industry where the US holds an outsized gatekeeping role. The American music market remains the largest and most influential in the world. When companies talk about going global, what they often mean, implicitly or explicitly, is breaking into the US market. I mean, look at Cat's Eye. The US acts as a validator of global success, both because of its economic scale and its cultural hegemony. So when K-pop artists adapt their sound, style, or promotional strategies to appeal to American taste, they're not simply assimilating for the sake of it. They're responding to a global industry that requires alignment with US norms in order to achieve visibility, distribution, and recognition on a global scale. That doesn't mean K-pop is devoid of agency, but the field on which they're competing on is not neutral. It's been manufactured. What concerns me is how criticism of K-pop's Americanization often lacks this context. There's a tendency to moralize the issue as if adopting American musical styles or entering the US market is inherently a form of cultural betrayal or artistic degradation. My main concern is the artistic degradation. This overlooks the fact that American dominance in the cultural industry has been built and maintained through decades of economic policy, international diplomacy, and military presence. It is not because of an innate superiority of its music or pop culture. The playing field has been deliberately tilted to the US's favor. Moreover, many of the K-pop acts that succeed in the US are often those whose sound and image are the most familiar to Western audiences. See how many K-pop songs that are majority in Korean top the US charts. Ironically, it's often the most derivative or least innovative examples of K-pop that are embraced by American markets. Acts that conform to prevailing pop formulas rather than innovating or changing, adding something new. This raises questions about what kind of cultural exchange is actually taking place and whether the global success of K-pop is really a celebration of Korean culture or just its strategic repackaging through an American lens. None of this is to say that K-pop or the Korean entertainment industry is above critique. There are valid and important criticisms to be made about originality and authenticity, especially stealing from cultures that they do not belong to or are not respected. Particularly, my first thought is what happened recently with Yusult, a Black French independent artist whose music video was stolen completely frame by frame by RT featuring Soyeon, and how that's completely unacceptable. But I worry that some of the critiques, particularly those coming from Western commentators, too often lean into a kind of American exceptionalism. They frame Korean artists' pursuit of success in the US as a moral failing or evidence of cultural inferiority, without acknowledging the structural pressures that drive those decisions or the imperial history that shaped those dynamics in the first place. In a time of rising nationalism, not just globally, but especially within the US, we need to be very cautious when we discuss other cultures. Critiques of K-pop's global strategy should not become a vehicle for reaffirming American cultural supremacy. That is very dangerous and a very disturbing tendency I've been seeing a lot recently.
Despite all of my talking about treating K-pop as like this legitimate, authentic like extension of pop music rather than a degradation, I think it'd be dishonest if I didn't also mention how the more critical aspects when it comes to how K-pop steals from other cultures, as I think it's be dishonest to talk about the originality and then also not talk about this. It can't be denied that K-pop often takes from cultures it doesn't fully appreciate or respect. A glaring example is the recent controversy, or it was recent when I was writing this, involving Kiss of Life and their racist portrayal of Black Americans and Hispanic people during a birthday live. This group has heavily marketed themselves using Y2K aesthetics and McBling styles, both deeply rooted in early 2000s Black American fashion, and built their musical identity around R&B and hip-hop, genres pioneered by Black artists. Yet, instead of honoring the communities they draw so much inspiration from, they choose to mock them. The live didn't have to go that way. It could have been something cute. It could have been them dressing up as their favorite artists and then talking about the influences of their music and their favorite songs and the genre, and maybe even do a bit of karaoke. But no, they decide instead to do caricatures. It could have been a celebration, a moment to share musical influences, acknowledge the pioneers, and educate their largely international audience. Because let's be honest, a lot of K-pop fans only engage with rap and hip-hop through the sanitized commercial lens of K-pop itself. For many, it's their first or only exposure to these genres, which makes it even more important for idols and companies to handle cultural references with care and respect. Acknowledging where the music comes from, giving credit to the originators, and fostering real appreciation rather than performative imitation. Those steps matter. It would have gone a long way if Kiss of Life had used that moment to not play into stereotypes, but to pay tribute to the culture they benefit from so greatly. Instead, they end up reinforcing the very critiques that K-pop often faces, that it consumes Black culture without giving anything back, that it profits from the styles while disregarding the people. The kind of behavior doesn't just hurt the image of one group, it reflects a broader ongoing problem within the industry. Because when all you can say about the genre of music is these stereotypes and these caricatures of the people, it makes you wonder, do you even care about the music? Just to tie it back to originality and authenticity, that kind of disregards any claim you have to authenticity. If all this is a visual aesthetic thing rather than a genuine connection to the music. In the global music economy, where K-pop is so frequently uttered by critiques, this emotional investment takes on an even deeper layer. Many fans feel an urgent need to prove that K-pop deserves to be taken seriously, that it's more than just flashy visuals or catchy choreography. They want the world to see that K-pop is a legitimate art form, with real artistic merit. And one way to prove that is by highlighting innovation. My Fave created this trend. They pioneered this style. They inspired others to follow. They paved the way. It becomes a way of saying, look, they're not just following the system, they're shaping it. Which are all really silly things to fight over. I mean, really, who cares who does what pose first? But I understand where these fans are coming from, even if I don't participate in these ridiculous nonsense showboating. There are idols who have always been praised for breaking the mold. Figures like G-Dragon, RM, Stray Kids, and Soyeon, they're often held up as an examples of what authentic self-made idols look like. These artists are known for their involvement in songwriting, production, and artistic direction, but their success is the exception, not the rule. For every idol that is celebrated for coloring outside the lines, there are others who face backlash or even punishment for the same thing. Speaking up about mental health, questioning company decisions, or even just expressing political opinions can result in contract issues, hiatuses, or worse. The system doesn't always reward individuality. It often suppresses it, especially if it challenges the group's cohesion or the company's control.
That's why fan wars over who did it first aren't just petty, they're emotional. They're arguments over meaning and identity. In an environment where artistry is often questioned, originality becomes proof that an idol is more than just a product. It becomes a way to say they matter, they contributed, they made something real. Because this also validates the emotional reaction and attachment fans get from their favorite idol or piece of music. Being told that something that elicits such a strong reaction in you is fake doesn't feel good, and that's coming from personal experience. And an emotional investment turns even the smallest trend into a battlefield, where being first isn't just better, it's legitimacy that fans and a lot of idols want. If idols didn't want the legitimacy of being recognized as real artists, there wouldn't be shows like Show Me the Money or Masked Singer, let's be real. So this particular video has been all over the place. I kind of wanted to simply talk about how ridiculous it is for fans to fight over who did what first, especially when it comes to trivial things like looks or hairstyles. These fights and fan wars are embarrassing. But when I started to write about this, my mind started to wander and I thought about how other ways K-pop fans looked for originality and authenticity in their idols. And then I talked about a lot more. So yeah, pretty ambitious video, which I don't know if I was able to express everything I wanted to, but this is what I got so far. This feels half-baked, but I tried my best. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, go watch the last video because it bombed so bad. And until next time, bye!